everyone. Thanks for coming out this Sunday afternoon. I'm Emily Ma / EM Tidbits. Do you want me with the microphone or without? With? With? Okay. How much I talk really depends on how bored you look, as our guest of honor reads from his novel. So this is Barton Mitchell, or Jack. So I did my usual research to be able to introduce him, and I found all kinds. I have so many questions. Like, it says you're a masked crime fighter, so does it mean you're masked while you fight crime, or you fight masked crime?
Oh, that's a good question. I never really thought about it.
I know, and apparently, if you read to the bottom of his bio on his website, he doesn't exist. So this is interesting. This is very interesting for me. It's a first.
Yeah. Just trying to keep it mysterious. Trying to keep it.
Yeah. We're going to break the mystique here. So you're here to promote your novel, The Razor, which is fantastic. Yes, I have actually read it. And you said you wanted to start by doing a reading of some of the chapters, or is there?
Yeah. Actually, real quick, I want to tell one quick anecdote. From the earliest times I can remember, I just always wanted to be a writer, and even before I really understood what that even meant. 6, 7, 8 years old, and I remember as I was growing up, we had this closet that was underneath our staircase, and my mom had made this little work area for me, and there was a desk, and there was bookshelves, and a place I could hide in the back, and it was super cool, and I just knew that I wanted to write, and I didn't know how to do that, so my solution was at that age to, I took books that I already had, and I just plagiarized them completely on paper. I just wrote them out word for word and would take them to my mom in the kitchen and give them to her. And her reaction, instead of being the normal reaction, which you would think would be kind of horrific, like, you've just plagiarized Curious George, what are you doing? This is awful. She was actually incredibly supportive and would be like, this is really great. Good for you, this is amazing. You should continue to do this. And I would, because that encouragement was so cool to me, and it encouraged me, and so I continued to plagiarize all kinds of books until I finally got to the point where I kind of figured out how to do my own stuff and turned it in. But looking back on it, I really think if initially I hadn't gotten that kind of encouragement from her, I don't know if I would have continued, because it was so early on, that was a big thing for me. And the only reason I say this is because my mom is actually here tonight. She came up from Rudosa, and she's right over there. You're setting up a Hollywood joke, though, I have to say. Is setting up a what? A Hollywood joke. Plagiarizing other people's work. Yeah. How many screenplays have you sold? 2. Yeah, sure. What was this? Hemingway, amateurs steal, or amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, do you want me to do some setup for The Razor? Sure, go for it. So, The Razor is one of the coolest worlds I've ever seen in science fiction. The concept is that it is a tide-locked planet that orbits just exactly right, so that it's got a cinder sphere, which is uninhabitable on the sun side, a shadow sphere, which is uninhabitable and freezing cold on the dark side, and a really thin razor of habitability, and the whole ecosystem and everything there is there in that razor. And he takes this amazing idea and turns it into a penal colony. Thank you very much for that. But yeah, it is, which makes for an incredibly high stakes situation. So it opens with these people showing up on the penal colony with all of their baggage before their problems really begin. Yeah, that's true. As it goes, the crux of it is that there comes a point where the planet is evacuated for mysterious reasons. All the guards and all the staff leave, and the only people who are left are the prisoners who are there. And what was sort of intriguing to me about that was this idea that your characters are villain archetypes. Except it's not just the prisoners. Not too much of a spoiler, but yes, yeah, there's a couple. And the main guy is an engineer. His name is Marcus Flynn, and he's been basically framed for something that he didn't do. He works for the company that what goes on the planet is mining. They mine this really important element called Zitrillium, which is the featured drink tonight.
Yes.
That's right.
If you don't have yours, I tell you.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Good stuff, good stuff. And it's incredibly dangerous to do that, and that's why they use the prisoners to do it. But it makes the planet like the most important planet in the galaxy, because that mineral, that element is incredibly important. But Flynn's arc is wanting to get off. Obviously, it's the Shawshank Redemption type thing, and trying to reclaim. What he's lost, and in the course of the book and also of the series, he comes to realize, well, maybe he doesn't want to get off.
Well, and Flynn is interesting because the reason why he's there is he's being used as a pawn because he owns these patents.
Yeah.
Or at least one patent that is kind of central to the technology of starship drives and all of these things, and that's what makes him a target for people who want to control him.
Yeah, other companies and stuff. So, yeah, and he's also in a position to. Because he is so brilliant, he's the one guy who can kind of sort of unlock all the mysteries and things that are occurring. Yeah. So I'll read his. There's 5 main characters. He's sort of the main one.
So are you counting Raylan or Gable? Because there's kind of 6 main characters.
There's 6. I say 5 because Raylan doesn't have a POV.
I did, yeah.
So
you're
in this
Gable.
book and later.
Good. That's the other thing. He does finish the story that he starts telling. He does pay off all the promises that he makes in the first chapter. But I'm really glad to hear there's going to be more because there's so much else that could be happening.
Yeah, thanks. No, I'm excited to keep going. What really intrigued me about it was the idea of doing. Sergio Leone's I'm a giant Sergio Leone fan of anti-heroes. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have like Snake Plissken or Boba Fett if you didn't have Leone, I don't think. And so what's cool about this planet is that it's just a planet full of those guys, and wanted to try and do all those archetypes in kind of a different way.
Well, and I think it were well drawn because too often the anti-hero is somebody who's got their own higher moral code that just happens to contravene everybody else's moral code and gets people killed. And you don't really have that. I mean, you've got a very realistic, these people are doing what they need to do.
Right.
Just to make it in their worlds.
Yep.
And so they are sympathetic and they are understandable. They also, you get why they're locked up. You're not entirely uncomfortable with the fact that they're locked up.
Yeah, for sure. And then part of the mystery that sort of gets explained is that there's perhaps this ancient part of the planet that's starting to wake up that's not good. And so what's cool about that to me is that the only people who are left to sort of deal with it are these sort of villain archetypes, these anti-heroes, and they're sort of thrust into the role of being heroes. And not all of them are cool with it. Yeah, as the series goes.
Well, so you want to read the Flynn chapter, and then sort of the way this can develop is if you want him to keep reading chapters, you certainly can. If you guys want to start asking him questions, feel free to just raise your hand and can do that.
Cool. This is called Razorfall, which is what the term for landing on the planet. The planet actually, which becomes important later on, the magnetosphere of the planet is highly charged. So there's only one part of the planet where ships can actually land and get through. Otherwise, which is why the planet has to use trains and all kinds of other things to move stuff around because you can't actually use shuttlecraft. So this is chapter 1, this is Flynn's introduction. Every time he closed his eyes, he was drowning. Water poured into the car, flooding the leather interior as it sank into Elliott Bay. He remembered looking to the passenger seat and the shock that washed over him. The wound in her head, the spray pattern on the window, how her hair floated up with the rising water, copper strands shining in the city lights outside the shattered glass. He watched her vanishing in the cold and realized 2 things. He didn't know who she was, and he was holding a pulse pistol. The world shook and jarred Flynn awake. He was staring through the shuttle's tiny window again. The starfield from before had been replaced with something more distinct now, inspiring and frightening all at once. He recognized it instantly. A planet, 11H37, unique in all the galaxy. Utter darkness on one side, raging heat on the other. He could just make out the slim streak of green that split the 2 massive halves. It looked tiny, nestled precariously between its giant siblings. It looked like it was being crushed. It was called the Razor. In spite of everything, Flynn felt excitement looking at it. Everything that had made him what he once was came from this world. Then again, it also made him who he was now. The image of the planet, fire and ice split in half, lasted a moment longer, Then the shuttle hit the atmosphere and the windows were full of red streaks, and Flynn remembered where he was and why, and for how long, and reality came crashing back. Excitement faded, fear returned. He sat back in the hard, cracked seat and breathed deep as everything around him shook again. Before the heat shields slit down over the windows, he saw the ship's energy field flare to life with a bluish, crackling sheen. He wondered how many shuttles actually made it through the planet's ionosphere to the surface. The numbers probably weren't even published. After all, the ship was remote piloted, and as far as the occupants, well, no one really cared about them, did they? The shuttle shook again. He jarred upwards before the restraints on his ankles yanked him back down, biting into his skin. A strange static hum built in the air. He could hear it even over the engines. He felt the tingling on his skin, felt his ears begin to itch. It wouldn't be long now. There were 30 seats inside, screwed into each wall, forcing the occupants to stare at one another. A woman with worn-out skin, a big scar over her left cheek, and wiry, muscular arms sat in front of him. She was breathing heavily, the pace increasing each time the ship contorted. To her left was a kid with more tattoos than Flynn had ever seen, swastikas and hashtags, skulls and dragons, his head shaved clean, no older than 20. The tats in the head made him look tough, but Flynn could hear him whimpering and tried not to lose it. The pattern repeated everywhere he looked, in the eyes of every person who was shackled to the shuttle. He'd never met any of them, but he could guess who they were. Killers, thieves, gunrunners, tweakers, smugglers, hackers. No matter how shrewd or scary they had once been, they were all frightened now. All of them, because everyone knew where they were going. The shuttle vibrated. The static hum grew louder. The edges of Flynn's vision were beginning to whiten and flare out. Next to the kid with the tats sat another man. He didn't seem absorbed in his own anxiety as much as everyone else. Average height and good shape, and his hair was wavy, probably even stylish a few weeks ago before whatever happened to get him on the shuttle. There was a sense of order about him too, the way he corrected his posture each time the craft rocked, the equal links of his shoelaces. He had a different look. It felt like he didn't belong here as much as everyone else. Flynn could relate. For a moment, the man looked up and the two stared directly at each other. Then the shuttle contorted violently and they both closed their eyes, waiting for what was to come. The static hum became a whine, and then there was a scary groaning from the window behind his head as the fuselage began to stretch and bend. Flynn felt the gravity press him into his seat, but sensation in his feet and hands was gone now. The white in his periphery grew. Nausea blossomed in his stomach. The static whine filled his ears, threatening to burst them as the shuttle rocked and shook. Flynn passed out. There was nothing but darkness, until pain lanced through his body, jarring him back to wake. Electricity. It burned and froze, contracted all his muscles at once. He would have yelled, but his body was locked down. He heard people moan, recognized the sounds of vomit hitting the metal floor, could barely make out blurry shapes moving through the shuttle. They all looked the same, shades of gray and black with a single glowing spot of color on their arms. One of them stood above Flynn, a gargoyle with horrible elongated arms and glowing blue eyes and a sword that crackled lightning. "Wake your ass up," the thing spoke to him harshly, a frightening, staticky mess of sound. The sword arched down, more pain lancing through him, hot and cold. Flynn tried not to vomit at the streaking pain, the leftover nausea from the injury. He wanted to curl up in a ball, but he was still shackled to the seat. The pain refocused his senses. He looked back up and saw that it wasn't a gargoyle at all. It was a man, wearing a gray and black armored uniform like the half-dozen others now inside the ship. A yellow holographic patch glowed on his arm, flashing and morphing between the logo of a spinning circle and the word admissions. The glowing eyes were the reflected light from the HUD and the helmet he wore, and the sword was just some kind of electrified baton that sparked and fizzled. "Wake up," the figure barked, his voice emitted electronically from the helmet. Flynn's face stung in pain as the man backhanded him hard. He tasted blood. Another armored man moved to the woman on his left. His club sparked as it struck her. Flynn could see her body contort. The pattern repeated everywhere in the shuttle, which was no longer moving. They'd landed. They were being woken up from the unconsciousness that came from passing through the razor's charged ionosphere. Not gently, either. Moments later, rapid-fire metallic clicking echoed up and down the interior as the shackles on the passenger's legs and arms disengaged. Half the people inside fell to the floor, still dizzy and sick. Flynn managed to stay in place, but just barely. A man stepped inside from the rear airlock, and as he did, the guards all stood straight. The silence that followed let the sounds of vomiting and whimpering fill the cabin. The man wore the same gray and black body armor, the same yellow holographic patch, but unlike his men, he had no helmet. He was tall, older than the others, with a gray buzz cut and a tightly trimmed white beard. The way he stood, perfect posture, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind his back, he looked exactly like what he probably was, former UEG military. He swept a stern, unsympathetic look across the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily in the cramped confines of the shuttle, "let me be the first to welcome you home. The last home any of you will ever know, but most definitely the one you deserve." One by one, the whimpering and the complaining stopped. Every person inside the shuttle, down the line of seats and restraints, looked up at the guard captain, his armored suit, his shined boots, his short hair, flanked by his men. It was all very real now. "Get them up," the captain said, and stepped back into the airlock without looking back. The back of Flynn's head stung as a fist knocked him forward. He barely managed to stand to the dizziness and disorientation. Ahead, he could just make out a hallway beyond the airlock made of drab, faded cement. Words had been stenciled there in a nondescript yellow print. 11H37, hard labor colony, lifetime incarceration. A line had been drawn through the 11H37 and another word was scrawled hastily in its place. Razor. The paint was fading and old, and something about that, the fact that something so obviously against protocol had been allowed to remain for so long, implied many unsettling things. A boot kicked Flynn forward with the others, marching them in a line toward the airlock, and every step he took forward toward the faded words gave him a feeling of finality. It was all really happening.
Fantastic.
Do you guys want to hear about Maddox, or do you want to throw it open to questions? What do you guys want to do? You have a question, okay.
Did you have to consult any, scientists or physicists or other experts? For this?
And let me repeat the question so that it can be picked up. So the question is, did you need to consult any scientists or physicists as you wrote this book? Because there's a lot of science and tech.
Yeah, my main consultant has a one-word name, is Wikipedia. So, that's kind of snarky, but a lot of web research and stuff like that. But yeah.
Because what is your background before, or have you always been writer, photographer?
Writer, photographer. I'm also a software engineer with IBM.
Okay.
So some of the computer stuff I kind of get inherently, but
right.
All other stuff I have to kind of research and make sure it's somewhat grounded. But I'm not trying to be Larry Niven either. It's not like hard sci-fi. Like I really my stuff. My main influence has always been like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and Marvel Comics, and so I think if it's a bell curve, there's a suspension of disbelief there in some places. Yeah.
Well, and you cleverly, when you really have to get into the tech, it's a situation where the characters don't fully understand it either.
True.
So that also helps because they're just taking their best guess, spitballing it when they're.
I think that's the case, and then also the other thing that you can always do is just sort of, in the character's world, the tech is just so well understood. There's no reason to really talk about it much. So,
right. Yeah.
So that helps too, as far as like.
Right. You don't get into like how the trains run or.
Exactly.
With all the magnetic interference.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes.
Being his mom, okay, mom's got to speak. Okay. I don't have, it's really weird. I've gone from werewolves, which I love, to Edgar Allan Poe, which I love, to...
These are things I wrote.
And well, he's done some things, but anyway. But, and then Curious George, which we started out with, but now this is a big leap from Curious George. So I'm sitting here listening, and I'm going, okay, we've got werewolves, Curious George, Edgar Allan Poe, and this. So is that multitasking? I don't know what that word is. I'm old.
Perhaps.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, and to dig into your background a little bit, your first novels were YA.
They were YA sci-fi. They were YA sci-fi. It was called Conquered Earth. It was
St. Martin's Press.
St. Martin's Press. Yeah. I always pictured this Lord of the Flies meets War of the Worlds. The idea being that like aliens had taken over the world, but only the kids were left to fight them. But it had a lot of magical, like fantastical sci-fi stuff in it too.
Well, and they let you do that in YA.
Yeah, totally.
They're not as much of a purist, like this has to be science fiction, this has to be fantasy. You can totally mix it up.
Yeah.
Let's meet Maddox, 'cause
Okay.
Yes,
he's very cool.
Yeah. Going back to the archetypes, these sort of, again, the cool thing for me about this was being able to do all these archetypes that I love and trying to find kind of different ways to do them. In his case, he's sort of the corrupt cop in a way. He used to work on the Razor, but he was a ranger, not a guard. And Rangers are more kind of special forces guys who, if a prisoner gets loose or escapes, they're the ones who track him down. They're more sort of highly skilled. And he got involved in something that it's a little mysterious, and it's revealed as you go on that he regretted. And in his opinion, he got out of it too late. So he resolved it, but not quick enough, and he has a lot of guilt around it. And in his mind, he's pretty much exactly where he should be. He should be on the Razor.
Yeah, and what I like about that is that that's not typically the way that archetype goes.
Right.
You know, there's usually, again, like the higher moral code or whatever, but he's got a pretty regular moral code. He was in a situation, he didn't handle it the way that he feels like now he should have.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of done. All these guys, I think, especially when you first meet them, I try to have them all sort of be at the end of their respective roads when the book starts. And then the things that happen give them different opportunities than they thought they were going to have. So, yeah, this is Maddox's chapter. It's just called Maddox. Maddox had been here before, but it was still all new. He could see personnel entry to the glass partition where the new prisoners were being herded. He'd left through that port 2 months ago. Now he was returning through prisoner intake. Definition of irony. Yellow lights flashed above the mechanical doors that began to seal off the shuttle they'd arrived on, and when they shut, it was with a heavy metallic thud that jarred through everyone in the concrete room. He and the other prisoners, probably 40, had been marched into the intake area by the guards and assembled into rows of 3. He knew there were 3 automated processors. He'd watched them do their thing before, often with a detached fascination, marveling at the efficiency with which human beings became prisoners, and prisoners, in turn, became numbers. Glancing at the line next to him, he saw the same man who had been sitting across from him on the shuttle, thin with wiry fingers and soft hands, and a presence that had an odd depth to it. His stance lacked the ruggedness of the other prisoners. Everything that had made him who he was internal, Maddox could tell. People like that, the Razor tended to grind up first. Still, he'd managed to keep it together during Razorfall. He hadn't cried out when the guards struck him. But Maddox had seen this place change its fair share of people. There was no way to know who the man would be after year 3 or 4 if he survived that long, but it was certain he wouldn't resemble the person he was now. Of course, Maddox could say the same thing about himself, couldn't he? Year 3 or 4, Jesus. The line advanced, person after person, until Maddox and the other man were next. A guard waited there, brandishing his club, the processor line beyond him. Like most, he wore the armored helmet, the HUD behind the view screen, making the eyes glow blue. If there was recognition on the guard's part when Maddox reached him, Maddox couldn't detect it. If not now, he thought, soon. Strip, crackled the guard's disturbingly amplified voice. Maddox unbuttoned the hyperstatic suit everyone had to wear on the shuttle for landing. When he was naked, the guard motioned him forward toward the processor. The transporter was metallic, shaped like a sled, with sections branching off from the center for the arms and legs. Maddox stepped in and winced at the cold metal on his skin. It wasn't meant to be comfortable, but nothing on the planet was. The guard strapped him to the transporter, then slapped on the head restraint. All he could do was breathe and blink, and even doing that was uncomfortable. Enjoy the ride, the guard said through his helmet, then struck him across the face. Maddox tasted blood as the conveyor system locked on and shuttled him forward. Everything went dark. Strange lights flashed in his peripheral vision. He could hear screams in the distance, curses, weeping, the high-pitched rattling of the guards' electrified batons. Maddox's heart pounded. He knew what was coming. A computer monitor appeared above him, following along, lowering just inches away until the only thing he could see was the dim reflection of his face in the dark glass. The monitor flashed. Words scrolled. Prisoner intake process, version 12.4.5, identity confirmation scan. From the dark, a metallic arm descended. Attached to it was a small reticle that drifted down toward his right eye. Stare into the reticle. Do not blink. Red light burned into his eye. On impulse, Maddox looked away and then jolted in pain. The sled was electrified. It stung bad. Compliance required. Stare into the reticle. Do not blink. Maddox swallowed, did as the monitor instructed. The red light flared again. It lasted a second, then the laser shut off. Inmate identified. Name, Maddox, James. ID number 28444. Conviction date 8/21/2174. Infraction, first-degree homicide, conspiracy and embezzlement, human trafficking. Blood type O, Rhd negative. Medical concerns, none. Biotech, none. Tattoos, none. Gang affiliation, none. First-degree homicide. The other charges were bullshit, of course, tacked on infractions to cover the asses of the ones who were still alive. But the homicide, that one he owned. That one was legit. Basic sterilization protocol. A hiss of sound like the buzzing of bees materialized ahead of him as the gurney moved into the dark. His body passed through a thick mist of freezing liquid. It burned like acid. Maddox couldn't help it. He screamed. His cries ripped the dark like those of all the others around him as whatever microbes he brought along were burned away. The monitor reappeared, descending down. It flashed on again. Maddox's breath came in short bursts. He knew what was next. ID implant protocol. He tensed as he read the words. A new arm homed down toward him, a mix of sharp, wicked-looking contraptions, dripping with antiseptic. The restraints around his neck tightened, locking his skull in place. The strap on his chin cranked down, forcing his mouth open. Maddox choked, gagged, barely able to breathe. He could just make out the tiny polymer drill at the end of the arm, shriek to life as it descended. Instinctively, Maddox tried to twist out of the way. His eyes shut tight, the drill pushed into his mouth. A sound like saw blades on metal filled his head. Pain, a mix of ice and electricity, lanced through his jaw as the drill plunged efficiently through bone and cartilage and nerve. He screamed, but the contraption inside his mouth struggled, tried to turn, but there was nowhere to go. Pain just kept pouring into his head, filling him up with white heat. He started to black out. Then the arm pulled out of his mouth, and Maddox gagged again. He'd just been implanted with the same microchip all prisoners on the Razor received. If he ever wanted to get it out, he'd have to remove his entire jaw. The monitor flashed above one more time. Intake process complete. Prisoner group designation color, white. Thank you for your cooperation. Cooperation means reward. Resistance means punishment. The monitor went dark, but it didn't lift away. The transporter ground to a halt. Maddox was still 100 yards from the end of processing. His eyes narrowed. Then the figures appeared above him, 2 on each side. They were dressed like guards. No helmets, lighter, camouflaged armor, much more physically fit. One of them leaned in, smiling unpleasantly. A muscular, balding fellow with a handlebar mustache. Maddox knew him well. Reed. He'd been in Maddox's unit before. In fact, all 4 of the men above him had. They'd been like family once. Hey, Sunshine, Reed said. Ain't you a sight? Maddox flinched as the big man took his chin between his 2 calloused fingers. It still hurt bad from the implant. How's the jaw? Always figured that had to smart like a bitch. Maddox said nothing. Even now he was still detached, still felt blank. He wondered, though, how long that would last. At what point did not having anything to lose no longer count for something? Nothing to say? Reed asked, still sporting a smile. Well, that's okay. Not a whole lot to talk about anyway. But we do have one thing to get to. One of the other men moved closer. Maddox remembered his name too, Jericho. He raised something up, something Maddox wasn't surprised to see, a metallic shape at the end of a crude pole. Another man lit a blowtorch and held it close until the shape on the end began to glow orange and hot in the dark. It was the same shape the guards all wore in their arms. 2 circles, a larger one with a thinner one inside it, the symbol of the Razor. Went out of our way for you, Maddox, Reed's voice told him. Don't want you feeling lonely. Made sure to be old friends where you're going. Jericho brought the superheated iron closer and closer. Maddox gritted his teeth. In the dark, the 2 circles burned into his vision. Reed leaned in so he could look Maddox in the eyes. You had it all once, boy. Sometimes I wonder if you even knew. But you threw it away. And for what? I mean, you gotta wonder what the point of it was, right? Maddox stared at him, breathing hard. He could feel the heat of the iron near his neck now, could see it glowing hot in the corner of his eye. The only thing I wonder about, Maddox answered, his voice hard, hoarse, and raw, is what the fuck took me so long. Reed nodded, seemed to accept the answer. Fair enough. The only thing Maddox could see was a faint orange glow from the branding iron. Welcome home, Maddox. Maddox screamed as the brand sizzled into his neck, searing his skin into flakes. It lasted only a few seconds. That was a plus. The beatings, though, they lasted longer. All four of them worked him hard. As the blackness began, in that moment he anticipated for so long, Maddox saw exactly what he expected. He saw the woman, dark black skin, dreadlocks, eyes like coals. He saw her in that strange storage container with all the others when the airlock sealed tight. Everything he'd done after that had been because of her, but it had all been too late. And now he was here, where he belonged. Maddox passed out as the blows rained down.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions or anything at this point? Yes?
Sorry. How long did it take for you to develop your 5 main characters? How long did you work on that?
So the question is, how long did it take to develop these 5 main characters?
This book took me, this is my 4th book. It took me twice as long as any other book, probably because of the amount of POV characters that are in it. The other ones only had 2 for the most part, and then it kind of expanded. So this was longer than a year to write. The reason I answer it that way is because, for me, characters are constantly evolving as the process is sort of going. So it's not like I totally figured them out up front and then it happens. So, so yeah, year and a half for the whole thing.
Do you give each one like a whole backstory? Do you figure out their entire life before you?
Yeah, so the question is, do you give them the whole backstory? I know you can hear, I'm just making sure that the camera can.
Yeah, I do. I think it's important. I develop a lot of their story, like who they were before and everything leading up. A good amount of it never even makes it into the book, but that helps inform the character and how they speak, what they do, how they behave.
And it sets up a lot of the action and problems in this first act.
Oh, for sure.
You know, so all of it, there's nothing that happens that's just like because it's supposed to happen, because it's that kind of book that somebody's getting beaten up. There's always a reason behind it, and you always demonstrate that.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. I think all the all the backstory for all the characters was pretty established. Who they were, well, with the exception of Gable, who's sort of an enigma. But yeah, the next character I'll read is Key, and who is similar to that as well. She comes from a very different world from Flynn, and even a very different world from Maddox. She's a pirate, a space pirate, going back to the archetypes, who had kind of, in her opinion, gotten her and her crew thrown onto the Razor, and she wasn't the leader. Her boyfriend is actually the leader, but he disappears, and so everyone on the world where they're put looks to her for leadership and support, and some of them get killed, some of them leave, and she feels like she's completely failed them.
Well, and one thing I thought was especially strong about Key is too often criminals are just sort of, muscle and meat shields.
Right.
And, you actually delve into the fact that there often is a family element to these gangs and things. And so that's really what people are using to put the thumbscrews on her in this first chapter. And, which I thought gave her an authenticity that you often don't see in criminal characters.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely a goal. I mean, everyone, they're more than just, walking props. I mean, like you sort of get them and you get their motivations for things. And Key's, if Key has a theme, it's fear. Fear of failing. So when she starts, there's one person left, failing completely, and then never wanting to sort of be in a position where anyone looks to her for anything ever again. And that's sort of the end of her road. Again, all of them are sort of at the end of the roads, and what occurs on the planet leads them to, or kind of forces them to reevaluate what they thought they wanted and where they thought they were.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that they're at the end of the roads. I remember as I was reading through that first act, I was thinking, well, there's a lot of action here. I mean, he knows how to create action and create backstory that leads to action. Is this going to be kind of one of those novels, though, where it's just like, and then this other person gets beat up, and then so-and-so gets killed, and the body gets thrown into somebody's cell, and, is it just going to be kind of relentless like that? And, oh, no, it is not. When that second stage rocket fires at the beginning of the second act, it is literally a complete game changer.
Yeah.
So because Key, without giving away too much, Key gets handcuffed to somebody else, and I'm just kind of like, how many chapters am I going to just read about them fighting with each other in solitary, handcuffed to each other? Oh yeah, that's so not their problem
Right.
in this book.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about that because it gives away a lot of stuff, but that was a
Yeah.
cool sort of plot thing to try to figure out like, how to keep these guys together. And
Yeah, that's a very effective way to keep them together, is to chain them together.
Oh yeah. Solves a lot of problems.
So yeah, do you want to read Key's
Sure.
story?
So just so you know, I think I said earlier, the planet is, the purpose of the planet is for mining that particular element, and that element grows, blossoms in the cinder sphere, which is the superheated part of the planet, and it's ultra lethal heat, ultra lethal radiation, and the only way to get to it is they use these things called crawlers or SMVs, surface mining vehicles. They're these giant land-based craft that travel along travel deep into the cinder sphere. They can resist the heat, and they mine, and they come back out. What's interesting about the vehicles is that they're sort of equal parts mining, obviously, but they're also mobile prisons because the workforce on them, 1,000, 2,000 inmates are prisoners. So they're sort of mobile prisons that are also rolling. And the one that Key is on is also the one that Flynn and Maddox are eventually put on. It's called the Charon. So this chapter opens up on that SMV, and this is just called Key. And also, when I said Key being different than everyone else. She is sort of one of the ways that manifests is that she has a very sort of intense, in-your-face vulgarity that really isn't it just there just for there. I mean, it is sort of a part of who she is. I'm a giant fan of vulgarity, so this was a lot of fun to write and kind of come up with very creative stuff. It isn't so much present here, but it is a bit. But for any sensitive ears, I apologize for what might be in this chapter. They were just tattoos, the wings, red, blue, yellow, angel-like, stretching from her neck to the curve of her lower back. A small act of vengeance. She got them the same night Mace beat her for the first time. Her skin was caramel brown with a sheen that somehow always made it look wet. The only gift from her Hispanic mother she ever got, and Mace demanded she keep it bare. They itched right before the second beating, the skin red from 8 or so hours of needlework, and ever since they'd flared up when something bad was coming. Probably just intuition, but it was never wrong, and they were itching real bad when she woke up. Key's eyes snapped open. Above her, the same view, the bottom of Nia's mattress, tarnished in odd brownish shapes. The stains were like clouds. She spent months deciding whether they looked like faces or ships or letters when they'd first gotten to the Charon. Now it had lost its allure. Nia stirred above her as the intercom blared through blown speakers outside their cell. 3 short blasts, followed by the staticky voice of whichever asshole was on morning shift today. Rise and shine, lords and ladies. Getting more worms for you to play with. The supply dock line up in 5. There was a groan from Nia above, and the shifting of her weight as she rolled over. Outside, the sounds of stirring began to fill the cell block. Harsh laughter, curses, the occasional sound of someone puking. Nia's naked legs swung down from the bunk and dangled next to Key's head. Key rubbed her back on her less than soft sheets, scratching the wings on her back. Worst hangover, Nia's voice still crusty with sleep. You were there, Key answered, stretching her arms out as much as she could in the cramped bed. After we scrapped that mining probe and the Kublai Custer. Yeah, Nia's voice was disappointed. That was mine too. It was a game they played, or rather a game Nia played. She racked her brain for experiences equally as bad as our current one. Rarely did anything measure up, but it made Nia feel better, so Key played along. Nia hopped off her bunk onto the floor. She was naked except for her underwear, and the scars up and down her body stood out. Knife cuts, gunshot wounds, teeth marks, an impressive collection for someone so young. Just 18, barely legal, and locked up here for the rest of her life. And whose fault is that? Key asked herself bitterly. Nia stretched, cat-like, ran her fingers roughly through her spiky, multicolored hair, shades of pink and purple, then moved for her locker. Key's was next to it. Other than that, the toilet and the bunks made up the whole of their accommodations. The walls were carved with the scrawlings of hundreds of former inmates, names, dates, boastings, insane ramblings. The walls were metal. To read them, you had to get at just the right angle to catch the light. That had lost its allure, too. 2 jarring blasts from the intercom. 2 minutes to go. Key moved for her locker, scratching her scalp with her fingers. Her hair had progressed beyond the stubby, sharp phase and was actually starting to get soft. It was time to shave it again, but the hair maintenance spot had been down ever since the brawl between BloodClan and Graham 2 weeks ago. What was a girl to do? Bargain for a fucking razor? Key yanked open her locker, stared at the same content she saw every morning. Clean red jumpsuit, freshly vacuum sealed, shined boots, black with yellow laces, thermal socks, standard issue synthetic cotton underwear, the scratchy kind, also vacuum sealed, all of it newly clean, smelling of detergent. The lockers were automated. Stick in your gear at night, it got whisked away to laundry. Clean versions appeared when you woke up. That was one plus the hard labor incarceration Key. Key hated doing laundry. You ever wonder if we get the same clothes every time? Nia pondered, pulling her jumpsuit from her bag. Or am I swapping with all the other size ones? Since we're the only res, the only size you're swapping with is me. Nia smirked. You're not a size 1. When gang members or ship crews hit intake, they were all assigned to the same crawler. Not only that, they wore the same color, probably to help the dipshit guards know who was who. She guessed the logic was that gangs and crews were already used to working together, which added up to increased productivity. And productivity was all the people who ran the Razor were really interested in. Key slipped the clothes on. The suit was more than just a covering. It had electrical clips and hose inserts for connecting to a variety of other suits, much more cumbersome. Heat suits for mining, rad suits for working in the crawler's reactor, pressure suits for atmosphere generator duty. Key zipped hers up, slipped the sleeves around the mag bracelets on her wrists. Then she heard something drip. Key looked at Nia. The girl was staring down at the floor at a small pool of blood. It was dripping from her nose. Nia looked dazed, wiped her nose with her wrist, smearing blood all over her face. Well, shit. The girl's knees buckled as she fell to the floor, blood everywhere. Key grabbed her before she hit. God damn it, Key thought, not now. When the seizures hit, Nia got nosebleeds. It looked worse than it was. So far they managed to avoid her losing it on duty, but it was just a matter of time. The final buzzer sounded over the intercom. 1 minute to be at the front of their cells before the beating started. No way they were making that. Nia moaned in her arms. She'd been their crew's most recent hire. Mace picked her up at the Eero station. Another stray. It looked like the Key, but the girl had proven herself tenacious. She was like a rattlesnake bred with an arc welder, had dropped Fleer with a kick to the balls on the second day after he tried to pull her into his room. Key liked her, immediately felt protective of her. After all, being a teenage girl on a ship full of horny ice pirates was tough. Key knew. She'd been that girl once. A loud buzzing ripped down the cell block. She could hear the pinging of locks snapping free, then the rattling of clear polysteel doors sliding open. Groggy voices, boots scraping the metallic floor, shock sticks sparking. Nia moaned in Key's hands. She could smell the urine where the girl had pissed herself. Key swallowed. Nia, gotta wake up. Gotta get off your ass now. Getting beat wasn't a problem. Key was used to that. What she was worried about was that they might learn what Nia really had. Lucor's disease, also called Zytrillium poisoning, common among ex-miners. Big shock that something powerful enough to run every reactor, biocomputer, and electromagnetic hub in the galaxy was dangerous to handle. Get exposed to enough X, it started breaking down your body, all the little pieces that held it together. Nia had caught it here a few months ago, and it was a death sentence on a prison crawler. Dozens of inmates came down with Lucords every year, and every one of them went missing shortly after. Nia, Key shook the girl, blood everywhere. It was coming out of her mouth now too. Gotta wake up, the fuck is this? Key didn't need for the guard to have his helmet off to know it was Drake, a short little prick that had tried twice to have his way with her. Both times he'd left with scars. Key spun around. Drake and another guard, both in gray armor, blue spinning holograms on their arms, stared down at her and Nia. Drake, listen. Drake's baton rammed into her stomach, doubled her over. A second hit slammed her to the floor. Nia fell to the side. Drake grabbed Key by the hair, sharp pain as she was dragged across the floor. Contraband search, Drake said above her. This one. What about the other? The second guard asked, baton sparking, moving towards Nia. Looks like Lucords. Let you know, Drake replied, dragging Key into the hall. Depends on how well we get along. Laughs echoed from the other inmates in the F4 as Key was dragged into view. Different colors of jumpsuits, different colors of skin lined up and down the hall. Key felt hot anger. She bit, she clawed, she went for balls, the usual. Another strike with the baton made everything go blurry. The door to the interrogation room slid open and Jake threw her inside. The room was just a metallic square with a table in the center and some cameras along the ceiling. No clear polystyrene walls here. What went down in this room wasn't for general consumption. Key scrambled back against the far wall, trying to shake off the haze. She felt blood on her forehead. Drake tapped some buttons on his wrist controls. The lights and the cameras all faded out. Key tensed. Anything goes in my mouth, you lose. Jake just laughed, in a strange, calm way she didn't like. I don't guess it's going to come to that. He tossed something onto the table, a small metallic box about the size of a cigar case. 2 minutes before they start wondering what's up, Drake said. Key stared at him in complete confusion. The tension from before seemed to vanish from the room. Key wiped the blood from her scalp. 2 minutes for what? Drake moved back toward the door outside, sealing it shut. Hurry the fuck up. You get busted, I get busted. Key cautiously looked at the box on the table. It seemed innocuous. It also didn't look like anything she'd seen on the carton before. Shiny, perfectly proportioned, new. Slowly, she moved toward it. There was one latch, keeping it sealed. Key flicked it open with her thumb. The lid raised up automatically. Inside was a digital screen and a single syringe, a hypo, filled with a pale blue liquid, ready to inject. What the hell? The screen inside flashed to life. The image of a man appeared. 60 or so years old, thin, pale, bald, small black wireframe glasses, a gray suit, gray tie, all nondescript. He would have blended in any colony on Earth City, or any colony or Earth City. You never would have looked twice. Key had a feeling that was the point. I will refrain from using your name in the event this message is intercepted, the suit said. He stared at Key with an unsettling detachment, like this video was one of dozens of things he had to do. You have been identified as a candidate capable of carrying out a task my employers require completed. You have been identified as someone with the proper motivation. You will have noticed the syringe. The injectable inside is doxypaxylline 190. Key felt the world swirl away and vanish. She stared down at the syringe with a new sharp focus. You are most likely aware of this medication's high success rate for achieving remission of Leukor's disease. Key's eyes were locked on the syringe. My employers are willing to guarantee delivery of 9 individual doses of this medication, enough to remission your cellmate's condition. There's no need to describe the general unavailability of doxypaxylline 190 on the razor. As such, I'm sure you will appreciate the value of our offer. Citrullium poisoning, what Nia had, required a special medication, Doxy 190, the thing the suit claimed was in the hypo. Doxy 190 contained processed citrullium, the only thing that would counteract the raw stuff running through Nia's veins. Maybe that was because the two didn't get along well. In larger quantities, when processed X met raw X, they tended to explode in a way that disassembled whatever particles were nearby. So any form of processed X was strictly forbidden here. Not even the blood clan could get Doxy 190 through the supply depots. Key knew this because she'd asked, and Whistler had laughed in her face, which made what was happening set off all kinds of alarm bells. Skepticism on your part would be natural, the suit continued, as if reading her thoughts. I suggest you administer this dose to your cellmate and observe its effects. When you are convinced of its legitimacy, you can proceed with our proposed arrangement. Key looked back at the screen. The suit was staring at the camera exactly as before. It was a recording, of course, but it felt like he was looking right at her. Calm, detached. Something about how confident he was bothered Key. There's a new inmate joining your SMV this afternoon. We would very much like it if he were to not survive his incarceration. Key smirked. So that was it. They wanted her to off someone. The suit's image on the screen was replaced with a still frame image of a very different person than Key expected. Thin, unassuming, with curly hair, blue eyes, and totally bereft of the hard edge you generally saw on the razor. For lack of a better word, the guy looked normal. The suit's image reappeared on the screen. Once we have confirmation of the inmate's termination, the remainder of the medication will be provided at monthly intervals. Rest assured, my employers are the kind who find that failing to honor agreements is unprofitable. And profit, one might say, is the reason anyone does anything, which is why you will accept. That and the fact you are very close to having nothing left to lose, aren't you? The suit paused, to let the words have their impact. Whoever he was, he clearly knew more about Key than was comfortable. The guard will escort you back to your position, he said, finality in his tone. He will ensure nothing happens to either you or your cellmate while you evaluate our proposal. We look forward to completing this arrangement to the satisfaction of all parties. The screen went dark. Just like that, he was gone. Key was left with the box and the hypo. She stared down at it, still unsure. Put it in your pocket, Princess, Drake said. Hide it under a mattress. You won't have to worry about cell inspections. It's been taken care of. Key felt icy fingers on her spine. If this was all legit, hell, if half of it was fucking legit, whoever was pulling the strings here was beyond powerful, and they had played the right angle. Because it was true. What choice did Key have? She was about to lose Nia. She was about to lose all of them. And that was a weight she couldn't bear. The hypo was cool in her hands, heavier than she expected. Drake moved forward and picked up the metallic box, then looked at her through his helmet, cocked his head to one side. Supposed to have interrogated you. Maybe you need a few bruises to make it look convincing. Key stared back. You wanted to look convincing, asshole. You should be the one with the bruises. Drake scowled and yanked her out of the interrogation room. As he did, Key thought of the picture of the man that the suit had shown her, the one she was going to kill. She thought of his features and face, committed them to memory. And his name, Flynn, Marcus Flynn.
So those, I would say, are your three most human characters.
Yes, that's probably true.
How are we doing on time? Who's got the time?
5:05.
5:05? Okay. Why don't we do some more Q&A? And then there are two other main characters, or we can also go into the other room and do the signing and hang out and drink Citrullium, not the actual stuff.
Wah, wah.
Does anybody in the audience have any questions?
I know, I'm just,
No, it's great.
listen,
Oh,
I'm
goodness.
just, so, you already said the arcs are really good in this book. Do you have a larger, because you said this was gonna be a series. Like 3 or 4 books, maybe?
Yeah, how many do you have in the contract for this entire series? How many books?
Right now I'm pictured as 4,
4,
Yeah.
okay.
but we'll see.
So what was their contract? Did they ask for more than one, or are they doing the one and we'll...
We'll do the one, we'll see.
Okay, those are always fun, aren't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Which is, everybody buy this book. I know a lot of people like to wait until the entire series is done.
Mhm.
You have no idea how many series that kills.
Mm.
The authors do not have the opportunity. Put them on your shelf and read them once. They're all out if that's what you want to do, but please do buy the first book when it comes out.
Thank you for saying that, because I find that as a total trend in the industry now. Like it's I think because of binge watching TV and stuff like that, like our attention spans are a lot shorter than they used to be.
Yes.
And there's so much content out there for in publishing, with self-publishing and everything else. So most publishers, for newer and less established authors, they're not getting the series up front. It's
Right.
one and then we see.
Yeah.
It's a different reality.
Publishing, even very successful publishers, is always a very thin margin business. So, really, it does make a difference how many people step up and buy the books. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into writing. Your mom gave some of your background, and you gave your plagiarism story. But in the between that and landing your first contract, how did you build your contacts, write that first book, get that first contract?
Yeah, I wrote fiction forever and ever and ever. That's always what I thought I would do. And then when I got into college, I got really interested in the film side. I was a giant film fan too, and I actually went to film school. And for a long time, all I did was screenplays. My stories are kind of visual in my head anyway, so it was kind of a good fit. I sold my first script when I was 26 or 27, still Warner Brothers. And then my next one I sold within 3 months to Fox. And I, in my head I thought this was supposed to be difficult. This is awesome. This is clearly how my life is going to be going forward. And I quit my job and was expected just to sell script after script, and didn't sell anything for almost 10 years after that. It was just a giant drought. Not for lack of trying. I wrote tons and tons of script. As the market, you know, was very different. But just kept at it, because that's, you know, I don't know. I mean, if God came down and told me you'll never sell anything ever again, I would still write. That's just what I do. It's what I love to do. I go on vacations just to write. So I just, you know, sort of kept at it, and oddly, I transitioned into comic books. I wrote some series for Dark Horse and series for Boom Studios.
Which, for people who don't realize, comic books are scripts
Yeah.
that are then illustrated.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people have no idea what a comic book looks like before it's in its final form. But
Yeah.
it's not unusual for a screenwriter
Right.
to then be writing
Yeah.
comic books. Yeah.
It's actually, for me, it was more fun to write comics because you get to describe the panels. You have the page, and then you describe each panel and what the panel is, and you can, this panel's bigger than the others. There's an impact panel. It's almost like directing in a way. And it goes to the artist, and they do their own thing. But yeah, it's fun. I'd like to do more of that. But that made certain opportunities, and then I kind of got some more rewrite work from that. And I had an idea for. It's so nebulous, it's hard to say where ideas come from, but I had the idea for Conquered Earth as a young adult.
Which is,
sci-fi
yeah,
thing.
your YA series.
Yeah, and I mean, I had agents and stuff at that time, which helped it, and I did this giant, like, 50, 60-page treatment, and that went to my editor at St. Lawrence Press, whose name is Brendan Deneen, who's also a writer and owns, I can't remember the name, he owns a comic book company, I can't remember the name, it's not Aardman, but it's a smaller one. But he writes the Flash Gordon comics, and it's super cool. He's a writer too, which is really cool to have, and an editor. And our tastes were like all similar. We kind of finished each other's thoughts. One of the best working relationships that I've ever had. And he loved that, and I developed that with him. And then he moved over to Tor, which is under the Macmillan umbrella, obviously. And my favorite publisher of all time. Growing up, half the books on my bookshelf were Tor books.
Well, the joke about Tor is that it stands for taking over rack space.
Oh yeah,
Their,
that's great.
their strategy is to get as much of that rack space as possible.
Yeah.
So, you know, if only a certain number of bestsellers
Mhm.
are going to come off that rack, if the most of that rack is Tor.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have produced so many of the major
all
classics.
all
And,
kinds of stuff, yeah.
yeah.
Wheel of Time. I'll just
Yeah.
like everywhere. So it was cool. It was like this amazing thing. Like he moved over, and I was like, oh, I have like the famous triangular logo, which is that on my
Yes.
on my name, and that kind of, I don't know, brings us to where we are.
Yeah, and so did you keep your same agent? Because you're with YA, very much a children's agent. Did they
Yeah.
also negotiate this?
Yes, my agent is Rosemary Stamola, who is also Suzanne Collins' agent, The Hunger Games. And so yeah, she started along with Suzanne doing really early age stuff, but her stable now is pretty big, and
Yeah.
it's grown. But yeah, so yeah, I'm with her for literary. I have a book to film agent, which is Jason Dravis, the Dravis Agency,
Right.
and then my film agent is Valerie Phillips at Paradigm.
Oh, okay.
She's been like my agent, on the film
Yeah.
side for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I mean, because there's kind of three agencies in film paradigm,
Yeah.
ICE and
ICM.
ICM, sorry.
Yeah,
and,
William Morris
William
Endeavor.
Morris, Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they're one of the big ones. Your screenplays, were they ever produced?
They were not, no.
Which, just to put that in perspective, there's a writer here in town who's, very enthusiastic, writes a lot, spent a lot of time in Hollywood, made a very good living. George R. R. Martin never had any of his screenplays produced. Actually, he did write for some television, but there's a lot of writers that make a very good living.
Yeah, it's a
selling
weird industry.
screenplays. Yeah,
You can make really good money writing stuff that never gets seen.
yeah,
With rewrite work and just, selling stuff. It's
yeah. And that was George's
yeah.
experience for a long. I mean, part of why he came back to
Yeah.
writing novels again was because he wanted to actually see it come all the way to fruition.
Yeah, I remember I read William Goldman, who was a famous screenwriter, but also a famous novelist. In one of his memoir books, talked about if you're a screenwriter, like just screenwriting, probably won't be totally satisfying for you because of that, and also because what actually ends up on the screen is 50-60% of
It's a
what.
committee. It's all done by committee, basically.
Yeah. And so he always encouraged people to, if you do fiction, then it's a lot better because it represents a lot more of how you see stuff.
And then a lot of writers in Hollywood get into the production side, or did that ever appeal to you, being in the writer's room of a television show or anything like that, or was that just not something that?
No, it did, yeah, for sure. It's just a completely different track.
Yeah.
You know, if you're selling spec scripts for film versus, you know, a lot of those guys, they start as script assistants and things like that, and
Right.
work their way up, and it wasn't, Paradigm had a television branch, but it was almost like you're on one track versus the other,
Okay.
unless you're, you know, I mean, Benioff from Game of Thrones, who is known as film, like, and it's pretty established, you can sort of transition over to if you want. I'd like to, because I really feel like all the best writing on screen-wise is happening in television,
Yeah.
probably for the last 10 years.
Oh yeah, I mean the golden age just keeps getting more and more.
Oh yeah,
relevant.
it's really
just, yeah.
Yeah.
Your photography, so how did you get into that? And is that, I mean, you aside from having a gorgeous Instagram feed,
Oh,
what, you know, are you a professional photographer, or is that just?
I am, yeah. I mean, to an extent, I'm represented in a couple of galleries, and I do gallery shows and stuff. It was one of the reasons I moved to New Mexico a long time ago. My grandmother gave me Ansel Adams' Southwest book, and I fell in love with that. And I shot here, and then I moved to Taos, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, for that reason.
And you wrote this in Taos.
This I did, yeah, exactly, yeah. There's a bar there called Alley Cantina, which I love a lot, and yeah, I wrote most of this book there, yeah, when I lived there. But that was why I kind of moved, and I just sort of fell in love with northern New Mexico and the Southwest, and the energy and how creative it is.
It looks like you moved quite a bit. You've been in Southern
Yeah.
California, you've been here, you've been in Austin,
Yeah.
and this is not the first time you lived in Santa Fe.
Right, yes, the second time I lived in Taos twice, and now I just moved this weekend here, actually, back here.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you, yeah, very excited.
And he made it, which was
Yeah.
not,
Yeah, there was some issues.
was not
but,
necessarily a
yeah.
given for a while there.
Yeah.
So, well, how far are you into writing the sequel?
To the proposal stage now, or when you
Okay.
see what happens, yeah. But Brennan has actually left Tor. He's went to a film company.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be a different editor.
Mhm.
Interested to see how that goes, but he seems to be behind it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
publishing the editor is it's their kind of role to sort of champion the books at
Yeah.
the publishing and push them forward. So,
Yeah, an editor with the publisher is kind of like a showrunner for
Yeah.
a television show. Like, it's not just that they edit your words, they are the shepherd of the entire process.
Yeah.
And it's kind of up to them when it gets,
Yeah.
you know, when the galleys get set, when it gets released, all of those things, and whether or not it even makes it through. They're the ones who pitch it to the marketing department saying,
Right.
I want to buy this.
Yeah, they try to get it, yeah. And then once it's even bought, like, it's their job to try to get buy-in from marketing and from the higher-ups into the individual books, like which books get what attention from all the different departments. Depends on how well the editor does in, like, pushing it.
And, you know, who gets the great cover, which you did
Oh, yeah.
get a beautiful cover.
Oh, thank you, yeah, you know. My favorite thing, I always love all the tour covers. There's always my favorite thing, because usually there's these giant painted scenes or something from...
Right.
Yeah, that's always, I was really excited to get one.
When you
Mine
actually
was
got a painted one, I mean, so probably more than anybody wants to know about covers,
Right.
photo manipulation is what most covers you see are.
Yeah.
To actually get the painting, this is quite a bit more expensive to hire an artist to actually do the painting. This shows that they really put money behind it. And when they start putting money behind it, they're more in debt when they start selling the
Yeah.
book, and that's what really kind of drives them then to try to move those sales.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
so, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes?
Curious, do you identify with any of these characters?
I think, you know, it's probably a stock answer, but all of them in certain ways, that they're all sort of aspects of me. Flynn certainly, because I mean, he's the closest to my actual point of view of being in this really difficult, very...
And would you
frightening
consider the
situation.
publishing industry the razor, or? No.
Was that? Oh, yeah, yeah. I never thought of it that way. That's interesting.
Did you want to say any more about that?
About what?
About how much you relate to any of the
Oh, no,
particular
I mean,
characters?
yeah, just all of them, but Flynn especially, because of he's the easiest one to write, because I was like, how would I react in this really scary situation?
Yeah, he's the least messed up.
Right,
Yeah, at the
In
start
some
of
ways,
the at the start of the book. At
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
Where does the idea come from? I mean, do you dream it, or is it just do you
Yeah,
develop
it's
it?
always
or?
so difficult to say. It's
Yeah.
Most of my stuff comes from I create and write to music, film scores, or just anything that's sort of visual, and a lot of it will come from that. I find lots of times I'll have one idea that doesn't work by itself, another idea that doesn't work by itself, and then suddenly I put them together and I say, oh, it's interesting how it comes. But the formation of it is always pretty nebulous. This one just came from the log line, which was the idea of like prisoners on a prison planet being abandoned, and starting from there. And then, I mean, there's so much more. What you've read is kind of the cursory stuff. There's so much more to, like, the world, the mystery, and like what's going on, and it just kind of stacks. And so it was fun to kind of.
And just having that razor thin atmosphere ups the stakes later on when the atmosphere is being depleted, and so it's just kind of the setup. The two most common questions you hear as an author or doing author interviews is, where do you get your ideas from? And I have this amazing idea, will you write it, and can we split the proceeds? So, everybody has ideas in there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I get it's funny, I get pitched ideas a lot. Like, oh yeah, that's
ideas, unfortunately, are the easiest part, which isn't to say that they're easy.
True, right? True. Yeah.
Yes?
What do you listen to? When you say soundtracks, movie scores?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I mean, recent stuff. I mean, I love Zimmer. Obviously, I think it's kind of brilliant. This Blade Runner score right now, I think, is awesome. Going back in the day, I mean, I was a giant Jerry Goldsmith fan. Tons of James Horner, especially early James Horner, like Battle Beyond the Stars and stuff. I love that, like the old school stuff. Aliens and I mean, I'm just. I don't know. I've been a giant film score fan forever. I think there was a while I almost went. I thought about trying to be a film composer, which I do not. Anyway, it was completely insane that I would think that, because I just loved it so much, And then it was this odd realization, like at the first part of college, where I realized what I really loved about the film scores was that I would listen to them and they would generate in my head like story ideas, and that's when I figured out, oh, that's what I really like, and so then I kind of moved in from there. But yeah, I'm all over the place. What else what I've been listening to a lot recently? The Tron Legacy score, I think, is fantastic. I don't know.
Do your books have a playlist?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Yeah, every project I do, and then I also do. They also have a trailer, like a trailer, 2-minute a trailer piece.
Yeah, book trailer.
Yeah, that I do in my head, and I create. That's the first thing I create. Because if you think about trailers, it's actually cool. They give you the tone, they give you the main characters, they give you some of the setup. And then every day when I sit down to write, I will, first thing I listen to on the playlist is the trailer piece. And I will play it again in my head. And that kind of helps me, it's like a yardstick, like am I staying true to the theme, am I staying true to the tone? So yeah, and then all individual scenes will have music. But I only do that through like second draft, and then I cut music out completely. Because music is so emotionally, the music can do the heavy lifting, Like I can't have a CD that ships with this. Press play when you get to this part, So I have to make sure that the emotion really is coming from the words as opposed to just the music. But initially, it really helps too.
Well, music's great because it has to stay interesting, but it can't be the same. I mean, it's really a great way to set up a scene and keep it interesting without hitting that same beat over and over and over again.
Yeah. And if it's film score stuff, it's cool because it's very structured, and you can tell, oh, here's where this point happens, and you can, I don't know, it helps to like.
Yeah, and it's often kind of modular because some scenes it's like, well, they actually played these bars like 5 times.
Oh yeah, true.
And you can kind of think, well, okay, I'm not sure I'm ready to get to that soaring part yet, so we can do another 4 times. Does anybody else have any questions or anything? So from here, we can certainly move into the bar area and do the book signing, or he does have 2 other chapters he could read if you guys want more of the book, because it is a spectacular book. But it's up to you guys.
1 chapter in bar?
All right, 1 chapter in bar?
So, he just names, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Book's split into 3 parts. You don't actually meet characters 4 and 5 until part 2.
This may surprise you, but their problems have not yet really begun.
Yeah.
In what you've read so far.
Yeah. And I like that because I think to me, I sort of wanted you to get to this. Actually, this chapter will be the first chapter of part 2. But you sort of get to that, and you're like, oh wow, there's actually more characters than there is. Because of the, what do I want to say about this? Because of the magnetosphere, the charged magnetosphere, there's no shuttlecraft, there's no flights, everything is done on train. And so this chapter takes place on a train. When the planet is evacuated, there's the security protocol for evacuating the planet. All these protocols have code names. And the code name for this is a lost prophet. So you'll see that. It's kind of a mystery what the lost prophet is, but that's just the code that they give to everyone evacuate. So yeah. Take me a second to find it.
Well, the other thing about this being science fiction is this planet is a good place to sort of hide certain things that maybe you don't want people to look at too closely.
True.
And you see a little bit of that.
And this guy, this character's name is Zane, and he has, it gets explained later on, he has a power set, and that power is related to metal.
And he's actually kind of like literally a legend. A lot of people don't believe that he really exists.
Yeah, sort of infamous, especially in criminal circles. This is called Lucky Days. Ironic thing was, this had all been part of the plan. At least before the blue light started flashing outside the reinforced plastic cube they'd sealed him in, plus shackles and a muzzle attached by thick rubber bindings to the railing. No metal anywhere, nothing for him to use. Smart. He freed his gun arm about 20 minutes after they left him alone. The plastic shackles weren't a big deal if, like him, you didn't mind dislocating a wrist or a thumb to get out of them. When the Rangers came back to check on him, they couldn't see his arm was free. He was just a big, hulking shadow to them, face covered by the muzzle, turned away like a bogeyman they'd managed to capture and seal away. He dropped one with a side strike to the baterion, a spot an inch or so back from the eyebrows, a structural weak point in the skull. He was probably dead, but there was no way to tell. He could have snapped the second one's neck, but he needed him, so he drew him in instead, broke his nose to keep him disoriented, and yanked the scattergun off his back holster and tossed it away. No reason to keep it, but the biometrics, it wouldn't fire for him. The one he was holding was young, just a kid, razored hair, probably right out of Colonial. He didn't even bother to struggle against the hand around his throat. He was a ranger, kid or no kid, and he knew what was what, which meant he knew he wasn't going to be the one to resolve this. 2 more rangers had their guns drawn at the entry to the cell, all aimed at him, but he already had their boy held up as a shield. He didn't need a gun. The hand around the throat was enough. He could crush a larynx as fast as they could pull their triggers. There's a set way things like this go, but it doesn't have to, an older ranger said, a captain. Mid-40s, still strong, still lean, not as quick as he used to be, but he had experience to fill in the gaps. The handle of his gun was faded and worn. It didn't shake in his hand. The man's voice was level, even with one of his men lying still on the cell floor. He was a pro. This isn't going to change anything. You're going where you're going, end of the day. You know that. It changes everything, the prisoner corrected him. His voice was even, deep, and smooth, filtered strangely from under the plastic muzzle they fitted him with. Right about one thing, though. It doesn't have to go the set way. The prisoner's eyes moved slowly up and around, re-verifying the situation, one hand still locked to the rail above. Contained compartment, 1 exit, 2 locks to get loose, 3 rangers left. Better odds than he'd been expecting. Things were looking up. The prisoner's eyes settled back on the captain. He might have to kill all 3 of them to get out of here. Here's how it should play, the prisoner said slowly. Unlock me, I let your boy go. Take a dive out the bulkhead door, hit the ground running. No doubt our paths cross after that, but by then it won't matter. And then you get your shot. The ranger's eyes thinned. So did the eyes of the one next to him. A little younger, rising up the ranks, he'd heard the captain refer to him as lieutenant. There was fire in that one's eyes. That one would blast away if it were any other day, or any other prisoner. The problem for everyone involved was that he wasn't any other prisoner. This particular prisoner had a no-kill order sketched in bright, flashing red letters across his holographic file. The powers that be wanted him alive. They wanted their weapon back. The prisoner had been disappointed in them for years. Today wouldn't be an exception. The kid in his grip tensed, blood still pouring out his nose. Captain, don't shut up, Scott, the captain cut him off. You drew bad cards, Cap, the prisoner said. Not your fault. The 2 men locked eyes, one from behind the barrel of a gun, the other from behind the scalp of a hostage. Men like this captain, they were open to propositions. Not because they were any smarter, but because they'd seen so much. The more darkness a man lived through, the fewer lines he was willing to cross. The reaper takes his toll on the living as much as the dead. The captain licked his lips, eyes narrowing. The prisoner had him right where alarm tones suddenly blared outside the reinforced cell. Blue lights strobed in the ceiling. The Rangers all stared at each other, stunned, but kept their guns up. Gotta be fucking kidding me, the lieutenant said. The older man's grip on his sidearm stayed tight. Confirm it. The lieutenant touched his earpiece, spoke into his comms. Skybird, Fallen Angel 3, confirm active protocols. He waited a moment, listening to what some other voice on the other end of the radio told him. Judging by his look, he didn't like it. Confirmed, the lieutenant said, his voice tight. Lost Prophet. Why? The captain's voice was just as tight. His gun hovered in the air like a rock. All I heard was 1 hour until extraction. We make an evac point or we ride it out planetside. The captain's demeanor darkened. Something serious was happening, more serious than the prisoner being loose. And that said a lot. Well, Zane, the captain said. It was the first time he'd used the prisoner's name since they'd met. It's someone's lucky day. Just not sure if it's mine or yours. If it makes you feel better, the prisoner's name was Zane said. There's no such thing as luck. The captain's eyes shifted to the kid in Zane's arms, kept him there as he told the lieutenant what to do. Overjack the X-Core, lock the navigation, blow the terminal. Zane's eyes thinned just slightly. That wasn't what he'd expected. The lieutenant stared hard at the captain. We're leaving Scott to do it, the captain replied. The younger one hesitated a moment, then stepped to the left out of sight. The captain noticed Zane's look. Still thought they wanted you alive? Zane didn't react, just kept his massive hand on the kid's throat. They didn't bring you home to dissect, the captain continued. They brought you home to die. The captain looked at the kid one last time. Zane felt the Ranger's muscles tense in his grip. I'm sorry, Scott, was all the captain said. Me too, sir. The kid knew his role, knew this kind of shit came with the job. His ticket was punched. But, like the captain said, things didn't have to go a set way. Zane loosened his grip. The kid pulled away instantly, wide-eyed, stunned. The captain stared back, unsure. Zane shrugged. It's all in the wheel, Cap. It all comes around. The Ranger captain smiled slightly, then nodded. The kid grabbed the body of the motionless Ranger, dragged him out the door of the plastic cell. When it was clear, the captain slapped a button on the wall. The armored door slammed shut, separating them and plunging everything to darkness, except for the flashing blue lights that filtered in through the tiny observation window. Zane stared at the strobing blue and laughed. It was a dark and booming laugh that overpowered the sounds of the engines and the alarms and the rumbling walls. He was genuinely amused. He guessed, all things considered, it made sense that he would finally outgrow his own worth, even to the UEG. Under his feet, he could feel the train rumbling harder, could feel the inertia pushing him back against the wall. The Rangers had set full throttle, had probably bailed out already. He was on a runaway train now, headed who knows where. Zane kept laughing. The irony was hilarious.
And so before we go to the bar, any last questions, first of all? Yes?
Oh, well, I'm just curious, do you have like an all-time favorite book?
All-time favorite book?
Yeah.
I think I always say, I guess it's still the same, is Neuromancer by William Gibson. Yeah, amazing author, amazing book. Super. Have you read it? No. Okay, yeah, you should read it. It probably feels incredibly dated now, but what you have to remember is that it was so prophetic, and it was an amazing futurist who predicted all kinds of stuff. Like this was late 70s, and terminology that we use today comes from William Gibson, like cybertech and the net and AIs and all this stuff.
It's like if you look at an old Frank Lloyd Wright and think, well, that's just a 1950s house, and then see it was built in 1915. That's kind of, when they're so good at getting it right.
Yeah, and full of awesome, all the stuff you want, awesome human commentary and stuff. But at the same time, there's ninjas in it and incredible. It's fantastic, amazing. The closest writer I can compare him to is like Elmore Leonard. Like it's that sort of super punchy prose dialogue that shouldn't make sense, because it's just sort of all comes at you from angles, kind of like Frank Miller almost. But it does when you read it. Like you totally get it. And amazing guy who is considered like an amazing science fiction writer, but doesn't really write science fiction anymore. Like everything is sort of contemporary. And I read once someone asked him, well, why don't you do that? And William Gibson's answer was, well, because we're living in the future now.
Mm.
And I thought that was like really super cool.
And do you have anything else coming out? You know, I know you're working on the sequel to this, but anything else you want to sort of tease or?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm running two new scripts right now. A new YA sci-fi book series. The thing I'm most excited about is I'm going to do a podcast, but a narrative sci-fi podcast called Derelict, which is
Very cool.
Yeah.
On your own or? With
On my own, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it here with actors, I think, but the idea is as if you're listening to the radio communications between a spaceship crew investigating a derelict ship that they found.
So like radio theater, basically. Except
Yeah,
for
exactly,
theater.
yeah.
Right.
But kind of found footage-y,
Right.
if it were audio.
Not just you and your friends sitting around talking about, oh yeah, did you see that
Right,
movie?
exactly, yeah. And that's kind of becoming bigger, you know, like
Yes.
Homecoming on Netflix, for instance, was a podcast before it was.
Right.
There's a lot of it, yeah.
Right, if there's no last questions, let's head on over and get our book signed.
Thank you. Can I just say real fast, like, and I've lived in Santa Fe for a while before, but like, I love this theater. I've seen everything here from Godzilla to Seven Samurai to Fireworks to Chungking Express. I mean, I've lived all over, been all over. Not many places have like a theater like this, and a place like this is super special and unique. And thank you so much for coming out and like supporting it, like you should support, not for supporting me, but for supporting this place, because it really is special and unique and awesome, and it's so cool to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.